Hello, this is Rosenberger with Process Triage. Thank you for your time. This will be an overview of our flagship service, our one-day Process Triage workshop. Let me share my screen. Okay, so this is our one-day workshop. Triaging is a French word, means to sort out or to sort, and we know it. We know this term generally from the mass casualty medical event triaging. And of course, in that world, there's typically a moment or an event where the wounded overwhelm the medical facility. What happens in those events is the medical facility, the team will stop patient care and what's called designating who the sharks are. They go find the blood, so to speak. And all they do is go look for, typically your best doctors or EMTs will literally wade right into the wounded crowd and start tagging people very quickly. And then those tags, there's 4 of them typically, they'll send them to the queue, and the red immediate life-threatening queue will be worked first, followed by the yellow delayed but serious. And on the yellows is what's called the golden hour, where you have at least an hour or less to get them treated, or they'll crump or crash into a red tag state. And then the greens will be the walking wounded will be taken care of after the other 2 are handled. The black tags normally it takes 2 doctors to make that designation, and of course you're treated with deep respect. But the point is that very little patient care is given during triaging. It's simply assess them, recognize their solution, and sort them and move them quickly into the right queue. In business process triaging, we happen to have 4 solutions to problems that business processes have. And primarily, these points of pain are any recurring behavior or event that's inhibiting the goal of how well a process should run. There's analyze, design, train, and enforce. And analyze simply is, if you don't know the most likely cause of a pain point, go study it. If you do know the most likely cause, is there a best practice, which could be a tool, technology, procedure, policy, whatever. But do we have a best practice if applied, this behavior will stop? If there is a best practice, the question would be, does it need training or learning? And if it doesn't need training or learning, then let's just enforce it. And by enforce, we don't mean blunt force trauma supervision. We just mean let your operating system handle it. So, and each of those 4 are then sized a small or large level of effort. Small is quick and dirty, knock it out like low-hanging fruit, or a big would be a large or big level of effort would be a project requiring a budget or a team or something like that. But the point here is that a business process is the patient. And in our one-day flagship workshop, we'll identify and triage about 30 points of pain. We'll sort and size them into solutions and then rank them by basically which delivers the performance goal we're after, what's called a capability goal. And then work them in that order. And the important note here is that during the triage, we're not stopping to solve anything. We only analyze it enough to know how to determine what kind of solution it is and size it. Now, in terms of what focus area in a business, we generally are dealing with, at least initially, the sales and delivery processes, from lead to cash or bid to ship or RFP to cash or something like that. We might do other processes afterward because of high volume or complexity, but generally we're dealing with the sales and delivery. We might triage manufacturing if it's part of delivery. But the point is these are complicated processes, and as you see in the illustration here, these little gray boxes are organization charts, or boxes or handoffs where that process is moving through an organization. Generally, if there are silos or swim lanes or organization boundaries, those are really those are a real sweet spot for triaging. Now, I mentioned this capability goal. What makes everything about the triage have strategic fit and practical usefulness is that once we know what the process is we're going to triage, the host, typically an understudy of the sponsor, they'll draft a capability statement saying, make this process is capable. And generally it has metrics and it's sustained by date and it fits the overall strategy. And we're going to focus the triage on the pain points that inhibit it. Okay, and as I mentioned, the host drafts it, and then that's what will yield these 4 solutions. Now, if the solutions are analyzed a root cause we're not clear about, or design a best practice we don't have, or redesign one, what we know here is that the process itself has design issues. More cycles is a greater risk, and you'll just create more crap faster if you don't address these design issues. And most importantly, in these places, these points in the process that have these analyze and design efforts in them, that process is not scalable. You'll break stuff if you ask for more cycles. Conversely, where the train and enforce solutions are sitting, those are operating system things that are, do we have it staffed right? How's the marketing working? What are the resource management? It may indicate you want to formalize your operating system, and there are several out there: EOS, Great Game, Gazelle, or Rockefeller, eMyth. These are staff operating models that have been proven to be effective if your organization, your C-suite especially, your executive suite, needs a structured management practice. Okay? So the primary deliverable from a triage is a list of improvement solutions, all right? And that they're typically at least a 90-day or more list. And there'll be how I say it, there'll be a portion of them will be analyzed, some will be designed, some will be trained, some will be enforced. And the more analyzed and designs, the more risky or uncertain that process is if you're going to try to scale it. And then how many small nows or big now projects gives you a sense of what the level of effort is to close the gap. And of course, the more bigs, the more projects, the greater the effort. Now, when you look at that profile, how many analyzes, designs, trains, and enforces, the greatest gap between where you are today at the date of the triage and that capability goal is going to be, if you have a lot of project size analyzes, that's the most heavy lifting you'll see. Whereas if it's a lot of small action item size enforces, that's the least level of effort to close the gap, okay? And of course, the average improvements list coming out of the triage will have a mix of these. So what's the one day look like? We start off with kickoff remarks by the host, by the sponsor, typically not a break fix day, but this is a good to great day. It's a no fail day because it's all highly facilitated and structured. And the team, first thing the team does is they'll spend the morning building their map of their patient together. And that's going to give them situational awareness and put them on the same dictionary. We might mark up that map with some how fast or how many or whatever, if it makes sense to. Then we'll break for lunch, and then the host will issue that capability goal we talked about. Then the team will identify their pain points and then triage the rest of the afternoon until closing remarks, okay? Here's a team being facilitated through building their map. We use a very fast and amazingly content-rich style called action result mapping. Each circle represents something that's got to be created in the process, and the arrows represent the work to create those things. And then the map is laid out in the order that things are created. By the way, this is a wonderful technique for doing complex work breakdown structures very quickly with a group. Another thing, too, is that we map the best practice happy path, meaning when this process is working correctly, here's what it looks like. And no surprise, those go-to experts you pick to be your triagers are ones who live the work. They know what has to happen, right? And they have no problems designing that best practice happy path. And of course, after the goals issued, the team will post their points of pain, as you see this team here. And it's really Post-it notes. And where they observe a pain point. And so once we have the capability goal and we then have the process pain points, those are all tagged through what's called a triaging protocol. They fill out a card on each one of those points of pain that describes its solution, what type of solution and level of effort, including how would you measure success and who do you need. And then that entire day yields a deck of improvement proposals, as you see here. Of course, the sponsor wants you want the whole deck worked, rinse and repeat, and that creates a continuous improvement culture. And of course, because all of this is delegated to the go-to experts down the front line, the expert performers, you're delegating this. You're teaching them how to issue process, and that frees the executive suite up for more strategic things. Now, the very last thing that happens in the triage, next to last thing rather, is that the team lays out their proposal cards, as you see here, and they rank them. Which one should be worked first? Okay, so you're even delegating that. And then the magic special sauce moment at the end is when they are all in, they stand up and they assign themselves to lead or mentor their own proposals. So it's a very practical workshop. They're all in. They're gonna lead or mentor the ideas they came up with. So the workshop deliverables are a synced up team, right? With a nice bump in their emotional IQ, because they've issue processed for each other for about 2.5 hours. And we know that the highest performing teams have terrific situational awareness and emotional empathy, and everything about the day it reinforces those two characteristics. Of course, there's a ranked improvement proposals list, all the strategic fit, and the map itself is reusable for 1 to 3 years, as long as you don't change what you do. And then, of course, you get the scalability profile, which is that how many analyzes, designs, trains, and enforces, and their size, and all that's presented in a facilitator's report. It's typically a video report. It might be written, but it explains, hey, here's what you're facing. And then if we see any project size improvements that you don't really have the expertise to undertake, it's very likely we know who can because of our wide experience in triaging. Now, all of this is led by your facilitator, a certified facilitator, and they facilitate the pre-work and the setup with your host. They run the triage day. They provide triage results analysis. Now, there's a plan that the implementation plan is written by your host after the triage, and they'll coach that if needed. And behind them is the support center, which we run here in Kansas City, which we have the library of all the hundreds of triages we performed, and we actually produce some of the deliverables for the facilitators, so you get a standard national product. The engagement's real simple. The executive sponsor selects the process and points to a host, and that's it. Of course, agree on the fee. Gives open remarks, observes the afternoon of the triaging, and then champions the follow-through culture with the plan. And we can also review case studies if the sponsor's curious how it looks. Sponsor's host is typically his chief operating officer understudy. They prep with the facilitator, primarily the venue and administration. They select or nominate the triage team members. Of course, that's approved by the sponsor. They draft the capability goal, and then that's approved by the sponsor, and then they own the implementation plan. So from a sponsor's point of view, this is a delegate and elevate moment for a host. The triage team simply, they're invited. They're already prepared because they know everything they need to know to triage. because they're your go-to deliverables that actually live the work being triaged. And then they will lead their solution. So here's kind of the pyramid. Not a lot of work for pre-work, very little actually. And workshop's a full day, and most of that's led by the facilitator. The host and sponsor don't have much to do. And then post-workshop, the facilitator and the host, and a little bit of sponsor work. And of course, the triagers are going to participate in the triage day, and then they're going to lead and coach and master or mentor their own proposals. I want to stress that for those formal operating systems, and here's just 4 of them, we have a wonderful relationship with the implementers of these systems, the EOS, Gazelle or Rockefeller, Great Game, eMyth. I actually originally cut my teeth on eMyth, but have relationships with all of these. Now, when might you want to triage? And there are a number of occasions to consider it. One is if you're a startup, you've got a minimal viable product, but you're trying to get into orbit to minimal viable business. Triaging that team typically leads to what are your organization or what's your hire sequence going to look like? Might do it for just a routine. Hey, we do team builders. It's part of our culture to take a look at our processes. Let's do it this way once. Understand though, it's not play. I mean, the list will need to be worked. It may be that you really want to make sure every person in that core process, all your experts, they know exactly who's sitting, who does what, and who's ready for a real intense project. Triaging will set you up for that. It may be that you want to make sure you're working on the right next improvements down in that core process, and triaging will give you which ones to work that you need to focus on. If you want to make sure that culturally your goals are being looked at in all of these improvements, triaging does it. It may be that you've got a real hump to get over, a real process improvement. Say you set a goal to grow your company and sell it, or just grow it. Triaging will point out how to attack that big gap very quickly. Sometimes you want to get everyone focused and empowered, and you want everybody working on something important to improve things. Very typical of a company that's just been acquired by a private equity or venture capitalist. Triaging right after that acquisition moment really gives that new leadership team a sense of, can they really hit the gas? And can they really scale? What's that look like if they did? Sometimes you want to just get some fresh thinking, like, you kind of know what you think it needs. How about we get an idea of what, give that core team, that lead team, a moment to really be creative on how to improve things. You see that a lot with Great Game, for example, the Great Game of Business. Triaging works for that. Sometimes there's just communication issues. People aren't talking to who they should be talking to. Or it's just you're not happy with the tone of how folks are communicating up and down the process. There's strife, for example, or hate mail. Triaging will clear that up very quickly. Sometimes those divisions between organizations can almost be hard silos, and you need to knock them down to get work to flow. Triaging will absolutely, as a note here, push the plunger. It'll blow up organizational silos, at least down at that worker level. Occasionally you have a joint venture where you need to sync everybody up to figure out who's doing what, and kind of what's the divide and conquer of it, but they share a larger process, or they have very specific handoffs they've got to figure out in terms of partnership. Triaging will do that. And finally, what we know is the most innovating teams love autonomy, skill mastery, and a purpose. And very few, a triage workshop is so empowering. It creates so much situational awareness and empathy. It's a wonderful way to deliver that culture. So the way you contact us, you can reach out to any of our team members or facilitators on our team page on our website, or send an email to info@processtriage.com, or I'll be more than happy to take your call at 913-269-3410. That's US. And I will reach out to a facilitator that would be a good fit for you, either by proximity or by subject area. So let me stop sharing here. And so that's it. That's our workshop. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you. And thank you for hopefully being part of your continuous improvement culture. Thank you.